because this ministry comes out of my heart. It comes out of my quest. It comes out of my journey from religion to spirituality. And that's what we're talking about today, the quest for spiritual authenticity. And I think that's, I was reading about confession this morning, and I'm not going to pick on any religion. You might know what I'm talking about, but why we confess. What is this, the need to confess our sins if we have done something wrong? I've talked to people over the years that said they grew up Catholic and they would go to confession not because they had anything to tell, but because they were told to. You just need to go do that. And so they said they would make stuff up, and go tell the priest about sins that they had committed, that which itself would be a sin. I mean, when you put it, you're not supposed to lie, but it just. But what I was doing is reading about why. What does that accomplish? In theory. And it's really to clear your conscience. But one of the main things they said was to make your relationship with God okay, make it right, to bring it back into alignment. Because if you sin and you don't confess it, and God obviously knows you did it, so you're not going to be talking about it, you're trying to hide it. So you're assuming God doesn't pick up on that kind of thing, and God obviously does if God is omnipresent and all-knowing and all of that stuff. But it's also interesting that when a woman who was caught in the act of adultery and brought to Jesus, and the guys were going to stone her, and he said, well, who's without sin, throw the first stone. He didn't say you have to confess your sins. He didn't say anything about, say you're sorry or anything. He said, don't do it again, don't keep it up. But he probably said that because he knew how dangerous it was, to be caught doing that kind of thing. The prodigal son is his flagship parable. The son commits about every sin you can imagine. And this is a fiction that Jesus made up, a story he made up. So he's driving a point. You do a lot of bad things. The son comes home and he starts confessing his sins, and the father says, you don't have to do that. I don't want to hear it. Just come on home, let's have a party. We're glad you're alive. So there's no confession at all. And I think the idea that Jesus was trying to convey with that parable is the Father represents the nature of God, the all-knowing, all-loving, all-embracing nature of God. So there's no need to confess. But when you look at the confession industry, how much is built up around that, and they've got booths and all that kind of stuff to accommodate that, and just the belief in the power of confession, just the belief in itself. It requires you to accept the nature of God in a certain light. God is kind of a human that has this memory that if you sin, he'll remember it. So these are the kinds of things we get into in religion. And people will wade through this, a lot of times stay in it their whole life, never question it, just do what they're told. And other times they go through it and start questioning, start asking, just like I did, what does it do? Why do we confess our sins? Why should that be a part of our life? Don't you think it's interesting, too, that all the mafia were highly religious? They were all Catholic. They all would go to, the church, and they would get, they committed a few sins, I'm sure, probably beyond anything any of us will ever do. But there's a way to stay in touch in religion. A way has been provided. You shell out a few bucks, I guess, and you ask for forgiveness, and the slate will be wiped clean. But that's religion. And that religion presumes that God is anthropomorphic, has human qualities, remembers things you did. You remember things you did, I remember things I did, and we may carry the guilt of something we did, And that may do some damage. That may be harmful to us. Probably is if we're carrying guilt. But when you then translate that onto deity, onto God, like God's feeling that about me, that's a pretty powerful thing. But that has happened, that has been built up strictly within the realm of religion. So I've talked to many people over the years that have run into situations that their religion doesn't really answer, doesn't really respond to, doesn't help. And so they begin to question the validity of the religion, of this belief system. And a lot of times it's done through experience. You try to apply, you try to be a good Christian, good whatever, Buddhist, Hindu, whatever you're in. You try to do all that, but something seems to be missing. There's something that's not there. And because I think most of us probably live a pretty straight and narrow life, we all have our moments. You get into unity and you're told that your negative thinking's a sin, basically. And so we pick up that burden, because I had a couple of negative thoughts yesterday, I think, maybe, I don't know. None of you guys ever do that, so you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm sure. But in my early years in unity, that was a big thing for me. I would find myself angry or thinking negatively about something. It's not God that's going to punish me. I'm going to punish myself for doing that. And in a way I do, because if I think I've done something wrong because I think negatively, then that itself is a form of punishment. It's the guilt that goes along with that. And I guess it took me several years to realize I'm never going to get over that. I'm never going to get where I'm not negative sometimes. It's just part of the human experience. There's things I don't like, there's things I never will like, and when they happen, I don't like that they happen, and it's just pretty much that simple. So there's some things I've learned to see, they transpire, and I can let them go a lot faster than I used to. But I don't go around now with that feeling that I've committed some great sin. And we can get into that whole sin and punishment thing just as easily in new thought as we did in the old thought. We just say it in different ways. So we can get into a new thought religion, a system of thinking that is not much better than the old system. And so, you do that for a while, and then you start asking yourself questions, well, I wasn't hit by lightning, I came close but didn't get hit. So, what's going on here? And then I jump into all these near-death stories, and these people, one after another, say, I stood before the light, and not 1 ounce of condemnation. Absolutely none. Zero. And some of these people that say that did some pretty bad things. There's one woman I was listening to tried to commit suicide several times. She finally succeeded, momentarily at least. But even that kind of thing, there were no ramifications at all. Just basically go back and get on with your life. You've got a purpose, go back and do it, and stop messing around with all this negative stuff. And she tried to commit suicide because she thought she wasn't worthy of, she wasn't living up to anything. So she wasn't living up to her religion. She learned, it was a behavior she learned that she couldn't live up to. And I think that's part of the journey is, where does this come from? Where does this whole system of thought that we call religion come from? And we can actually find the beginning of it. We can find it in councils. We can find it, in churches. We can find it in when religious people get together and make rules. How many angels can dance on the head of a pin? That was actually an argument at one time. And they finally decided that was a ridiculous argument and settled on the idea, well, angels can dance on the head of a pin, we just don't know how many. So who cares? Who even thinks about stuff like that? It's like you have to be religious to think that way, to think that's a problem. And I'm not making light of that necessarily, although I am making light of it. But it's, you don't a person who is on the spiritual path does not run into those kinds of problems. And so that's what we want to do. And we want to know that we're on our own path, and that's a good thing, even though we don't always know. Because, see, one of the advantages of coming out of a system, you have a question, you know who to ask. You go ask a priest or minister or somebody, in authority. Or you open the Bible, you look for answers there. And a lot of times you find things that will answer the question that you have. But the answer that we are looking for any question is within us. And it is not always real clear. But one of the obstacles that keeps us from getting it is our training. It's often our religious training. We're trying to compare how we think we should be acting to, how we're wanting to act, or how we're being prompted to act, I guess, in our own consciousness. So the thing is, and I'm speaking to the choir, I know that, because all of you have stepped out of a system of some kind, haven't you? Do we have everybody stepped out of some kind of thing? And once in a while I run across people that haven't. But even if you were born in unity, you've stepped into a religious organization. You've stepped into a way of thinking. You've stepped into a statement of faith. Unity has a statement of faith. And if you adhere to that, or try to adhere to that, it's a pretty difficult path to go down. So I don't look at it anymore. And it's what I look at is my own statement of faith. What is my statement of faith? What is my spirit telling me to do in this situation? And it's telling me something, and I'm not listening, but I'm still not going to be condemned, only by my own reaction to my own inaction. So that's a pretty big thing to overcome. There's no punishment in this universe other than from ourselves or from, a system that we're involved in. There are people that are shunned, from religious organizations for their behavior. And like the Jews, they were afraid of being cast out of the synagogue. Back then, in that environment, when you're cast out of the synagogue, that means you're blacklisted. Nobody's going to buy your products. Nobody's going to hire you. Nobody's going to support you in any way whatsoever, because you are now an outsider, and it's almost like a death sentence. So that's how powerful religion is. Jesus grew up in that type of thinking. One of the most dangerous teachings he taught was, I'm in the Father and the Father is in me. That's blasphemy, according to the religion. You're equating yourself with God. Well, that's where we start. The Father and I are one. God and I are one. I am an expression of infinite mind. There's no place where God leaves off and I begin. In a certain religious environment, that would be blasphemy, equating yourself to God. But that's what we are. The Bible even says it, that we're created in the image and after the likeness of God. But somehow that doesn't count. It doesn't fit the religion, because we need distance between ourselves and God so we can put a toll gate in between. So the church becomes or the synagogue, whatever, becomes the way to reach God and to stay in good standing and all of that. So nearly all of us who have come into a more direct study of spiritual principles like this have some type of religious background. For whatever reason, we have stepped from that path and pursued one that is more suitable to our heart's dictates. And I would imagine that in most of our cases, this was a long process. We may have found things and read them on our own quietly, not really sharing what we were reading with anybody, but really responding to it, finding that it was a real light to us. And I think that's very interesting, why we would do that, why we would not stay within the confines of the system we were raised in and taught was the authority. Throughout my career, I've heard hundreds of stories from people who have stepped away from the safety of their traditional background and embarked upon a path that may not be so well received by their former teachers. And I've heard that so many times I've lost count. that somebody makes a decision to step on a path like this, this new thought idea, whatever you want to call it. It's an inside-out approach to life, spiritual inside-out job. And when they go back, as I did, I went back to my Baptist minister and shared with him the book Lessons in Truth. He said it was the work of the devil. And it was designed to suck me in because it's beautiful, it's freeing, it makes you feel good. Well, that's how the devil works. He just gives you all kinds of false indications that that path is correct. And so you go down that path and he gets you, and you wake up dead one day and you're in hell. And that's not real exciting. But something in me knew that was not correct. And it's that something that is so important for us to listen to. All of the authorities may be saying, you're wrong. Don't listen to that. That's Satan speaking to you. That's Satan trying to get you, and very cunning, using all the ways that'll suck you in, and this obviously is one of them. But when I read, when we read something that our soul knows is true, we know it's true. Our soul knows it's true when we read or hear it. We come across it's something in us leaps for joy because now we are seeing confirmed, hearing or reading or whatever, how it's presented to us. It's confirmed what we felt, and maybe we have never been able to articulate it. That's what I felt, is I didn't know how to say what this book was saying, but I loved what it was saying, and I knew it was right. And it's like that's one of the signals that comes to us. We have no reason to believe something, but we respond to it in a positive way. And that's a very important thing to acknowledge. And that, to me, is the real authority. You go, like I went back to my minister, and whom at that time I considered my religious authority, and he was my religious authority. He wasn't my spiritual authority. He was my religious authority, and he was saying, according to my training, what you're doing is wrong. It's a sin. You're going off the wrong path. Get back here while you still can. So that's a religious authority, but a spiritual authority, and I encountered some of these a little later, said you're on the right path. That's exactly how it happens. Is you come across something, you light up, and you follow it. And that's always the way it's been. And that's not always the safest way. It's not always the way that we feel surest about. In fact, I think there's a lot of doubt around getting off the main superhighway of religion, is stepping into something that that's not where the big crowd is. That's not where the asphalt is laid. We're on a footpath that's never been walked. And it feels kind of lonely sometimes. And then we come into little groups like this. The first 2 Unity churches I was involved in were well over 1,000 people. And one in Dallas, the first one was in Dallas, second one was headquarters of Unity Village. And it felt very powerful to step into groups like this and see that there's so many people that think like this. And I had no idea that there were that many. But when I went to Unity Village, that was like coming home. That was like all the real lights that I've experienced reading Lessons in Truth. Those all came on, when I went there. And it was very gratifying. So I would drive that distance, 60 miles one way, 2 and 3 times a week because it was so exciting. So something like that is right and is worth pursuing, because I feel so much better when I do it, when I go there and when I hear the message. And maybe what I recognized too was sometimes I would only remember 1 or 2 things that the minister said, but that was enough. And it was like, that's enough to get me through the week, and it was quite a nice experience. But on paper, it doesn't make sense because that's not what I was raised in. None of my family was involved in it. And so I should, follow that path that's familiar and safe and tried and true, that kind of direction. So I didn't do that, and you didn't do it. And, we understand why we stepped off that path onto something else, because when you see it and you respond to it, it's real. That's the direction you ought to go. Even if you end up saying, I made a mistake, that was not, and I've had people do this, I've listened to them say they found some, thing and they just lit up all their lights and they stayed with it for several years, and come to find out they thought it was a cult, or they just thought it was not near as good. So anyway, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, because you're here, and you're here because you're not there, and you're here because you don't want to be there, you want to be here. And that says a lot, that you put physical energy behind being here and the focus and all. You want to do it. And I think that's the other thing about religion. I'm not involved in this because I have to be. I'm involved because I want to be. And that's a big difference. When it used to be, when you didn't go to church, the regular organized religion, there's guilt around that because you should be there. You should go there. How many of you have driven by a golf course on Sunday morning, seen people playing golf, and say they should be in church? That's our old religion coming up. If God doesn't want them on the golf course, you can be sure he will strike them with lightning or something. There's something will happen to them. But there's as many people or more out on Sunday morning, I notice, playing golf than through the week. But that's neither here nor there. What would cause us to do this, like step up on another path? I think the answer lies in today's subtitle. We're looking for spiritual authenticity. While it can be said that the teachings we've been given are true to the beliefs of the early church movement, something has prompted us to question whether they reflect what is true of spirit. Jesus criticized the Pharisees with this quote from Isaiah. This people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines the precepts of men. That's basically what a religion is. It's a good description, is the precepts of men. It's the inventions of men. If I was separate from God, if you were separate from God, here's how the religion would function. We're separate, and so we want to someday be one with, we want to acquire oneness, acquire a state of oneness. So we follow the rules of that religion so we can stay on the straight and narrow and do everything right. Well, where did those rules come from? See, that's one thing that Jesus was good at, is challenging Judaism, challenging some of the things people were doing without even thinking, like wash your hands before you eat. Well, that makes sense, but sometimes he didn't do it. And so he was going to not necessarily go to hell for that, but that was a sin. He would heal somebody on the Sabbath. They said that was a sin, and he comes back and says, well, if your mule wades off into a bog someplace, aren't you going to pull him out, even on the Sabbath? Or are you going to just let him, or if your son gets in trouble, stuck someplace, are you going to just leave him there? So he brings their argument back to them. It's a man-made rule. Well, it is man-made because most of them were men that were involved in that process, just the way it was. But it's a human perspective. If God is separate and I'm here and I want to maintain good relationships, then I need to follow this contract. I need to follow these rules. They call it the Old Covenant, from the Old Testament standpoint. And the New Covenant is based on very similar ideas. It's been pointed out that while all religions reference God, none can encompass God. A religion is a collective perspective intended to guide people safely through this maze of appearances we call life, assuring us the best outcome. But the rules that are laid out are based on certain assumptions. Do you believe you're separate from God? If you believe you're separate from God, then these rules will make sense. You do what these rules tell you, and they make sense. And I think Jesus understood that his audience, some of them would understand what it meant to be one with God, some would not. So he spoke on different levels. But I don't ever get that he was trying to convert people. He was taking people where they are, just talking and saying, here's a principle that I want to share with you, and I'll put it in the form of a parable so you can get your mind around it, and you do with it what you want. But I don't think he was a one who was looking to convert people. When you get into the book of Acts and the apostles' ministry, those people are trying really hard to convert people, and they keep track of the numbers. 3,000 showed up today. That's a pretty good take, and I mean, the numbers of converts are listed many times in the book of Acts. If you look at that, the whole mindset shifts from speaking to people, waking people up spiritually, to how many numbers we got today. And the church basically follows that to this day. And it's probably not intentional, but the idea is, if we get 3,000 people, that means God's winning. We're ahead in the game. If 3,000 people would join this church, first of all, that would blow my mind because we don't have room for them. Although we could put this out there maybe, and they could watch. But the numbers don't. Well, the numbers are important. I'm glad that our message is getting out. I'm glad that we're going out through YouTube and through these channels. It's exciting to see that. But it's whether we do that or not, I'm still going to say the same thing. I'm still going to talk about the same ideas. And it doesn't matter to me if there's 10,000 people listening or 1,000 or whatever we have. It matters, but what matters most is the freedom to say this, the freedom to talk about these kinds of things, and to know that it's touching people in a way that they're not going to be touched through normal channels, because the people in the normal channels aren't talking about this kind of stuff. They don't know what it is to awaken to this spiritual reality that has nothing to do with the religion. It has to do with the organic aspect of my soul, what's actually taking place in me. And by that I mean the soul is pushing out all the time. It's saying, you think you're one thing, but you're a lot more than that. And it's doing this, it's pushing out. It's a light that is shining. Jesus said, let your light shine. I think that's what he's talking about. That there's something in me that says there's more to me than I understand. And rather than go out and ask somebody, what is this more in me? And get a whole list of things that are 2,000 years old or whatever. Somebody that says, well, go within yourself, go into your inner room, shut the door, pray to your Father in secret, pray to your source, pray to your own God in secret, because your God knows how to answer you, knows how to come through. And if you don't get the answer, just keep knocking, keep asking, because everyone who asks receives. And that is, why do I feel like life can be more? Why do I feel like there's something more in me than I'm expressing? It's because there is. And so you say, well, what is it? How do I get in touch with it? You don't go out somewhere and ask that. You go to that feeling. You go directly to it. What are you? What is this? It is the still small voice, and it's not a voice at all. It's a prompting. It's a light. It's the warmth of the sun. Like we look at these windows, we can tell the sun is out there. And we can open those shades and we can say, isn't it a beautiful day? But we can also walk out into it. We can have a direct experience. And that's the most convincing. When we say this is a beautiful day, we understand what we're talking about when we're standing out there in that cool air and warm sun. There's nothing like it. And that blue sky hanging over our heads. All religions are based on the belief in separation. If somebody can find one that's not, let me know. And we talk about like some of the Eastern religions are not about separation. They're all about, God is everywhere and we're in God and God's in us and all that. But either we're separate from God or we're separate from our higher self. All Eastern religions say we're separate from our higher self. There's the quest for nirvana, the quest for, that spiritual I am that I am. It's like, I'm here, it's there. I'm not separate from God. That's the idea. I'm in God. God is in me. I got all that. But something's still missing. And what's the missing item? It's me. And so it is a belief in separation. And as long as we hold that idea, we're going to act as if that's true. But that is an organizational teaching. It's an organizational belief. It's part of the belief system. Unity is based on that as well. When you look at the early writings of Charles Fillmore and some of the early teachers, 99% of what they say I love, I agree with. But this idea that we are incomplete as a soul, our soul is evolving, I no longer embrace that idea. Let's start with the idea that I'm already whole and let that light shine until it shows me my wholeness. I don't develop it. I don't study real hard and, meditate real hard and try to figure out how to become whole. I affirm that I am already that. I'm already whole. I'm already complete. And that mindset, that's my faith. That's me opening to the truth of that level of my being. And if I don't do that, if I keep saying, I just can't get it, I just don't know, I'm not developed or advanced or capable at this point of experiencing something higher. Well, you're already experiencing it. The fact that you're looking shows you, why are you doing that? Why are you looking? Why are you feeling like there's something more? That's the voice. But we are so used to thinking of it as, you pick up a book and read about it, and that's somebody else's opinion. I wish I could be like them, kind of thing. And that was one thing I kind of discovered early with Fillmore, who I really looked up to and still do in many ways. But I wanted to be at that level. Or Jesus, I want to be at that level of Jesus. I think I am, and I think you are too. We just don't know it. And that's what Jesus was trying to tell us. The things I do, you can do also in greater things. Why would he say that if he didn't know better? Why would he mislead the people that were listening to him at that point? He was not misleading anybody. He was stating the truth. And most of us qualify that. I've got the Christ in me. I've got this spiritual dimension in me, but I'm just not awake to it yet. I've got too many distractions. It doesn't matter how many distractions you have. It doesn't matter if you mess this life up totally. You're still okay. Your soul is still complete. Your soul is still whole. And anything that tells you otherwise is probably a teaching of a religion, some religion. This is where our need for spiritual authenticity really kicks in. If God is present and centered within me, then how can I know and experience God? If my soul is complete now, how can I live from this completeness? If sin does not damage my relationship with God, how can I come to know this unconditional love in which I live and move and have my being? These are questions that we pose to ourselves. We can ask somebody else and we will get an answer. But until we get the answer from ourselves, it's not ours. So the spiritual path is about trusting yourself. That's a huge part of it. You desire more because you are more. And where's that desire coming from? It's coming from you. And it is the voice of God. You don't have to call it that because that may make it seem like it's out there someplace. But it's your voice. It's your inner longing is that light that is your soul. And it's standing at the door knocking, waiting for you to open that door. I can search scriptures for answers to these questions, but I will not come to know the answers until I experience them for myself. Jesus advised to knock and the door would be open. He did not go into detail about how this works, probably because he understood that each person's relationship to God belongs only to them, that it isn't something that we find within the confines of a religious doctrine, but within the quiet center of our own heart. Okay, hopefully this message will go at least to YouTube in a way to people that have never heard it, because I know you guys have. And we have all stepped on this path because of this, because we have heard it, and because we're listening to it. And it's not an anti-religious thing. It's a more mature approach to the spiritual life. We can, if we want, we can stay in the system if we want, because a lot of mystics have done that. They stay within a certain system. A lot of mystics are Catholic. But they see a whole different realm. They see a whole different set of ideas. They see their oneness with God. That's the basic assumption of mysticism, is I am one with the infinite already. And my job is to wake up to that. So you don't wake up, you don't evolve it, you wake up to it. And that's a big difference. You've already got it. So that's not an idea you're probably going to get out of most religions, but you will find it on the spiritual path. Thank you for watching this week's program. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with others. We want to reach as many people as we can, and we appreciate your help. We have many subjects in our video lineup, so feel free to take a look. If there's a topic you don't see and would like me to address, just put it in the comment section. I'd love to know what's on your mind. To subscribe to this channel, simply click our logo. Thanks again for your interest in independent unity, and have a wonderful week.